Ilse. I am coming from with a 20 minutes of message that I hope you will take as a inspiration to move more. My background indeed is delivering many exercise classes, and one of my top favorite groups is 50 plus group, and I think one of the reasons for that is because they often come for pain management and just joy for movement instead of weight loss. And I think these are the motivations that I love to work with. And then we can play and we can look at the body mechanics and many other things which I find super interesting myself. And even if I don't work that much with the blood disorders, I do work a lot with the chronic health patients, and mostly it's arthritis, which is a very unfortunately common conditions among many people as well. So so this is a part of my work as well, to look how to include different people with different needs, and especially those who suffer from pain and some disability as well in their day-to-day life. And Christina asked me to look at the mental health benefits of the physical activities, and for that I would like to also define what is mental health, and the mental health according to World Health Organization. And I love this discussion. That's why I'm putting it out there. And there are a few reasons why I love it so much. So they define it as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, whatever normal is, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. And I really love the last part, and I'm gonna go back to that at some point in the presentation as well. But I think that the also emphasis that we are human beings, and the social interaction is something that's very important, and also finding our purpose is very important for mental health, is something that I feel very passionate about. Also, having worked in NGO sector for many years of my life. So that's mental health. And then when we talk about movement and exercise, we can separate those two words. And what I like to encourage when people talk about exercise, sometimes it's not very reachable goal, especially if you're suffering from the chronic illness or you are in a big pain and so on. But movement is accessible to a lot of people, and that means even moving your fingers sometimes. I like to have this idea of actually us waking up from the bed and fighting the gravity is already a great congratulative movement for us. That we can be grateful and quite happy about. So movement is about these small activities that you do every day. Again, starting from raising the finger, but indeed, it's daily activities like going to the shop or walking your dog, playing with your kids. That's also a physical, real physical work. Sometimes squatting and crawling, and lowering your level of being up and down. So that's movement. And when we talk about exercise, we talk about planned and structured exercise class that I'm sure that all of you have participated at some point in your life, or you do at the moment. But that's usually whether it's training your muscles or cardiovascular health. So that depends what you're choosing to do. I don't know if you know what's the good amount of movement for adults 50 plus. Yeah, no. But the recommendation is usually 150 minutes per week, at least as a minimum of moderate activity, which could be a quick walking to start with, but it can be also a bit more Pilates, some more powerful ways of yoga and so on, or you do 75 minutes as a minimum of like very intense activity. But that's just a minimum, but that's also meaning that, even if you do 10 minutes, it's already a good start. And it's much more than doing nothing. Sometimes I think a lot of trainers are focusing on whether you succeed or not, or you have to attain certain amount of minutes or certain amount of repetitions. But I like to think that already doing the most that we can is good enough for this moment. And the benefits of exercise, I'm sure that you have the mental benefits of the exercise. I'm sure that you have read somewhere in some magazines or journals. There are so many. And I was contemplating myself when I was preparing that presentation, how actually, even if I'm exercising myself a lot and if I'm training people in a movement, I tend to forget the benefits, and I tend to be sometimes like lazy or devote less time for exercising itself. And reading all of those things just reminded me of how simple things can make a big difference. And one big, huge benefit is the stress relief. I'm sure that you have experienced it with yourself, since I don't know, next time maybe you go to the exercise class, you can observe, first yourself, but also the others in the exercise group before and after class. It's very visible for the teachers, but it's incredible what 1 hour can do actually in the face of somebody and in the mood of somebody. So these things are very palpable in the room when I train people, but the science is backing that up as well. And the stress relief sometimes can happen also because we are distracted and doing something else than being in our own negative thoughts. So that's kind of a break for us, this hour or whatever you dedicate for your movement. That's a break for us to kind of focus on other things and have a break from ourselves and our own minds. And there's quite a decent research also that it helps depression and anxiety symptoms to lessen them. And the research at least says that it can be as beneficial sometimes, and not in all cases, but in some cases as good as some antidepressant pills and also cognitive behavior therapy. So that's quite a big thought or idea, if you like that. I am advocating therapy, but at the same time that sports can be as a therapy as well for your mental health. I like to, I like the thought of it. So, and of course there are other benefits like improved sleep, improvement in mood, increased interest in sex, which is also linked with often the increased self-esteem and self-confidence, which sometimes is increased also with the weight reduction. But that often is also, feeling your body and feeling your muscles and also sensing how much you can grow within every day, even if it's crawling 2 meters more than the day before, is already giving that sense of achievement. And that propels us into the further action. And it gives us also the self-confidence that's often very much needed for our mental health. And something that I also feel passionate, and I'm not gonna tell you a lot of things in 20 minutes, but I'm gonna tell you some things that I really feel for. And one thing that I feel for, especially also in bringing people into the nature, there's a lot of serious research done on exercising outdoors. And the benefits that you see on that slide, we already saw that exercise itself gives really a lot for our mental health and also for the physical health. But the benefits you see here, they're in comparison to the indoor exercise. So for instance, if sometimes indoor exercise in comparison with the outdoor exercise was linked much more with the frustration and some anxiousness and anger, then outdoor exercise is much more linked with more happy feelings. At least it was reported in several researches by people who were walking in and out the buildings. It made a difference. So either way, exercise does give us happy feelings and much more positive outlook. Nevertheless, if we do it outside, it gives us more. So that's something to keep in our mind as well, how actually we are often confined into these buildings and spaces. And sometimes we lack a sunshine and we lack a fresh air and many other things. And one interesting thing why researchers believe that green exercise or exercising outdoors can be more powerful or more stimulating is that it gives us a bit of sensory deprivation, because we are stimulated so much in day-to-day life with the screens, with sounds, with noises, with everything that's very we might not be aware of it in day-to-day life, but somehow it builds and it stresses us. And once we have this beautiful pathway in the forest or wherever we decide to go, by the stream and so on, it really gives us the pause, a restart, to be able to go on with our lives, which is usually more in a busier and louder and noisier cities or places. So you can consider yourself lucky if you're living in a green space. As there's a lot of research saying also that access to the green space is very, very important when we think of the longevity and also just improved quality of life, especially for the aging populations. But we are all aging population, right? So no escaping that. But yeah, especially 50 plus people are being researched on that. And another thing which is worth to mention when we think of exercising outdoors, and which I find very very motivating as a lazy person myself and not very disciplined person myself, is that we exercise much more when we are in outdoor spaces. And that could be also because we are stimulated, but not in a very negative way, as I told before, by the beauty and just the vastness of green or gray or whatever is the season and the outlooks out there. But the research is solid that we tend to exercise, move more, maybe sometimes faster, the intensity or the so basically the idea is that we don't get as tired as quickly as we would do indoors. And that's pretty great thought for people like me. And I think in general, also for the athletes, they've had similar studies on their endurance in indoors and outdoors, and the findings are the same, that we tend to do more outside. So, and also of course exposure yourself to the light. I don't know, it's one of the great things. The first thing in the morning to go out, and to go out and walk is even better, because it helps regulate our circadian rhythms, and they're very much connected to our ability to sleep or fall asleep and sleep deep, and sleep have a good quality of sleep, basically. So this is something to take into account as well, that we don't have enough sunshine and light exposure often in the society that we live in now. And of course, there are all these benefits of greater self-confidence and vitality and everything else, all the words that I hope will motivate you to go out and exercise and explore that. Another thing that I already said and told you about was the social benefits, and often it happens in a group settings. But if you happen to live in a society which is very talkative, also outdoors in a park, then you also reach that need for socialization, because you end up talking to people. But definitely when we think of the exercise and group exercise, it does good for our mental health as well, because we need each other. And in this socialization, we generate much more positive feelings, and hopefully, and mostly, with some exceptions, I'm sure, but it's very, very efficient for you to find a supportive, inclusive group that you could also exercise, because again, we are much more likely to do a little bit more, because more or less, I mean, we compare sometimes with each other, and we don't want to be the only ones not following the rhythm or not doing with enough effort some exercises. So it makes us also do a little bit more than we would do on our own. And it could be fun. I loved also working with my senior classes and then really building the community. And I really saw that social aspect in life, how, it's true that we are living more and more in individual societies, and the loneliness levels are going up the roof. So that's another way and to join some mental benefit of exercise and increase the benefit by exercising in a group. And the last thing that I wanted to express was the recent study that I read in the New York Times, and they have been quite many done on linking exercise with a sense of purpose. And again, it goes to a little bit older generation, and the research is done with the middle age and upper people, how exercising actually can help us feel more confident in setting our goals, and also we can have a more self-efficacy, which means ability to set goals and also follow them through. And once we have these goals and follow them through, we are much more likely also to feel that our lives has have some meaning and sense of purpose. And this is something that research is saying a lot of. As older we get, we struggle to find that sense of meaning in our lives and sense of purpose. It's really cool to think that exercise as such can help us, to stimulate, find new goals. And it does so also because we have all these benefits that I mentioned before. There is a possibility that the reason people exercise is because they have a sense of purpose. So it goes both ways. That research says that you can also generate that feeling of sense of purpose when you start exercising. So you might as well give it a try and see how it helps your life. And diaries are sometimes really, really nice ways to actually track whether something is happening with your physical health and with your mental health as well. And just to see how well you're affected by physical activities, and that can be a motivating factor as well. This is something to think about and contemplate. And a little, something that I use for myself, as mentioned, I also need to be motivated for more movement in day-to-day life. And these are my kind of helpers when I think of how shall I motivate myself. And one thing we can think of the movement and the system that we are in, as we are often outsourcing movement. I don't know how you, what are your life practices, but there are more and more deliveries from the shops being made to your doors. And I know that when I was studying sports education, then something that we were told especially is to ask our parents to go at least once to the shop, because they at least have a purpose to go out home. But this is just a little thought that daily movement matters. And when we ask somebody else to move for ourselves, like whether it's a delivery guy or girl or anyone, or somebody else who is, or let's say we take the elevator and not stairs. This is also considered outsourcing movement. We don't do it ourselves, but we kind of rely on technology or other people to do it for ourselves. This is something that fits to this sedentary lifestyle and is not doing good for us. And I'm not talking about the situations when we're really exhausted and the elevator is a way to go. But in our day-to-day choices, we can really analyze, okay, where is that we are outsourcing movement and where we can actually move ourselves. And moving means really putting more years or more months, whatever. We cannot calculate that easily, like how exactly will be the benefit of the exercise adding or years, but we can analyze really where do we outsource the movement and try to move ourselves a bit more. And of course, introducing more movement, mini breaks every hour, whatever you're stretching, for instance. I don't know what you're doing now because I don't see you. I just see Paul and Christina, but we tend to be very stuck and very immobile when we do some, I don't know, remote control work, close to the TVs. That's the finger might be the only thing that we might be moving, but just see where you can introduce more movement every hour. And sometimes the technology is what helps. I know in there's this in these smartwatches now, sometimes there could be a beep if you're not moving every hour. Then there's a reminder that you could do something at least for whatever is accessible at that moment for you. And another thing is knowing your mind, how it works. I don't know, like when I start to think about doing an exercise class for myself, I start to be very excited, and then I start to make excuses, like, because maybe I'll do it tomorrow, or maybe later in the evening when I will be more focused on what I'm doing. And then of course the evening comes and I am tired. So, there's other excuses that I make not to roll my mat out and do things. And I'm sure that you're the expert of yourself, and how your mind works and how you can fool it the best. So one way I fool my mind, or I don't let my mind to think, is this 5 seconds rule, which is don't think about it and just roll that carpet as quickly as possible and just start exercising. Because once I start to think about, then I really go in a lot of ideas what else I could do instead of exercising. So explore, and maybe next time you think of the idea of exercising and then you start making excuses, I don't know, whatever you do, just observe what you do and be curious and see how you can work around that. And of course, I don't know about you and if you have a dog or a cat or any animal, but I think animals are great teachers in a movement. And if you don't have one, then borrowing one and going for walks, it's yeah, it can be very motivating as well. We just had a recent conversation with my colleagues that sometimes we go out and walk a lot, not for ourselves, but for our dogs, because it's much easier to have, to walk for the dog than for yourself, but then you benefit as well. So this is something that could be helpful. I have a dog of my own, so, and he loves walking, so it's a so I'm checked with that. Another thing is just following challenges, and my partner had a challenge with his work group in January, and we did increase the exercise back home as well, because he really wanted to have that one free day. I mean, he had needed to accumulate, I think, 10,000 calories, something I don't remember, but it really also influenced me. And that means, you know, sometimes taking your friends or partner in these challenges or making challenge for yourself might be very, very helpful. And especially if you engage these smart devices if you want. But diary is always an option as well. So I think that's basically all from me. These are my contact details if you ever want to be in touch, or there's a lot of exercises as well on my Facebook channel. So if you want to try those as well, it's possible. So basically that's it from me. I don't know if you have any questions, or I'm going to stay until the end of this webinar. So you might ask as well, or ask on chat.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you for this invitation to speak to you all this evening. So I got the Healthy Movement at Every Age sort of end of the conversation around pain management. So I'm a physio in haemophilia based at the Royal Free Hospital in Hampstead in London. And so my clinical expertise, my clinical day-to-day clinical stuff is chronic pain management in people with haemophilia and haemophilic arthropathy. So a quick overview of the session we'll have this evening. Revisit a little bit of what Ilse said about defining what it means to move, and then sort of looking really within the bleeding disorders community around how it is to move when you have pain, and to move when you've got actually problem joints because of your haemophilia, your bleeding disorder. And then begin to sort of have a wee look at how we can possibly consider moving more and how we can move better with what we've got, and then how you might go about finding and doing things that matter to you within a sort of physical activity or a movement capacity. So if we look at what is healthy movement, as Ilse said, so physical activity is any bodily movement produced by skeletal muscles, and it's any movement that requires energy to be expended. Often might sort of feel it as aerobic and anaerobic. So aerobic is being able to go for a walk over a long period of time and have the energy to do that. And anaerobic is this idea of short, intense bursts. So you can, that's something like sprinting, or if you ran quickly up the stairs, that sort of very quick burst of energy where you're probably quite short of breath afterwards. Most people consider physical activity within 3 domains of existence, really. You sort of got being physically active within your household, being physically active within your sort of leisure pursuits, and being physically active in relation to work or school. Exercise is actually considered a subcategory of physical activity. And I think particularly for bleeding disorders and haemophilia and those with chronic sort of musculoskeletal conditions, physical activity, movement, and exercise can often get confused and combined, where there's sort of an assumption that they're all the same thing. Exercise is being physically active, but exercise is a planned, structured, repetitive, and purposeful movement. People do exercise because they want to be physically fit and well and have an aesthetic and look better, but also people do exercise because it brings health benefits. And you can do sort of consider exercise within a functional exercise capacity where you may want to do exercise or be encouraged to do exercise to improve your health. So you may have ill health, or you may be recovering from surgery, or you may need to have sort of extra or sort of a bit more coherent activity to maybe regain movement in your knee after a bleed, or to sort of regain some musculature around your arm if you've had some shoulder surgery. But functional exercise really is perhaps what you do in your everyday tasks to improve strength, balance, and motor performance. And traditionally, I suppose functional exercise is most commonly associated with rehabilitation or physiotherapy, where you come, there may be a painful joint or a weak joint, and you would be given some very specific exercises for that. We know physical activity in hemophilia has a lot of influences. Predominantly for a long time, those influences have been mainly negative, where we know for many growing up in an era without access to any factor or limited factor usage, that people were actually prevented or advised against being any more physically active than walking to the shops or walking to school. And that may have come from the school themselves, or from your own parents, or from the doctors that were looking after you. We know that message was based on a historical message of risk. And so there was this fear and worry that the more active you were, the more possibility there would be have more bleeding. And then if you have more bleeding and you're living somewhere at a time or an era or a place that had limited access to factor, it perpetuates the need perhaps to avoid anything that may require factor concentrate. Some people don't want to be active, they don't to be motivated, and actually that's got very little to do with hemophilia, but that motivation may be negatively influenced by many previous negative experiences of being active. So you may have actually chosen to be active to do some more movement or physical activity, and then ended up with a bleed or more pain, or getting told off by your doctor, or having an injury that you didn't want to tell your parents about. And so those negative experiences begin to sort of build up inside your own mind and your own sense of self. Coming from that idea of not being allowed to move, this idea of sort of the assumption that people know how to move and know how to be active. I mean, humans know how to move in the sense of purposeful movement. So we we learn to walk, we learn to sort of reach, we learn to dress ourselves and wash. But actually, if somebody like me as a physio tells you you should just go to the gym and be more active, actually, do you know what to do when you get there? Are you confident in your own body's ability to do anything when you get there? We know the fear of consequence. You do more exercise, you get more pain, or you might bleed. And then I suppose the biggest thing that was very common in people with hemophilia is this idea of chronic pain in their joints associated with the underlying hemophilic arthropathy. And pain in its own is actually quite a large negative influencer for wanting to be active. So if we consider about the definition of, this is the International Association for the Study of Pain's definition. And essentially what we're saying here is that pain is what it is, and it is what you say it is, and it is how you experience it to be. It may be associated with actual tissue damage, so joint bleeds are painful, and it may not be associated with tissue damage that we can find. So you may get back pain that comes and goes that we can find no biomedical or physical reason for it. That's not to say that it's not painful. It is painful, but it may not necessarily have anything happening bad in the tissues. Sorry. Dry throat, sorry. But your concept of pain is sort of encapsulated by the experiences you have throughout your life. And certainly those with bleeding disorders have usually had a lot of experience of pain. And that pain has often been very acute, has often required hospitalization. And so you can begin to see how perhaps the experience of pain is associated with other negative events that have happened in your life. And because of that, pain is always unique and personal to you. How I feel my pain and how you feel your pain are two different things. And it's knowing that the pain is there, but it's not necessarily the same in everyone. And we know that pain in hemophilia is very complicated because of lots of things. Actually, we know that bleeding is painful. We know that if you have arthritic joints, they're painful. We know that potentially to do lots of infusions is painful because the repeated injections. We know that pain can be made sort of, the experience of pain can feel worse if you're under a lot of psychosocial stress, or if you're worried or scared, potentially about things like surgery. And so it isn't as easy to just say, take this for your pain, this will make it better, or you should move more, this will be better, or to really be able in a position to remove all sources of potential risk or fears that people may have around pain and hemophilia. But actually, if we begin to understand the problems that people have moving with joints that are a problem, you can actually see perhaps why motivation to move may not be there. We know that people with hemophilia that have lower limb arthropathy, so arthritis in their knees and ankles, tend to use more energy than walking, when walking, than those without hemophilic arthropathy. We think that this is likely sort of your body's trying to accommodate to the extra effort of keeping your balance and keeping you upright and maintaining your center of gravity. In studies that were done in those sort of with osteoarthritis, so not hemophilic arthritis, but those that had arthritis in their knees and ankles and their feet, it's been shown that just the effort of walking and standing is 14 times more difficult if you have arthritis in those joints. If you look at going up and down stairs, it can be 5 times more difficult, and even getting up from a chair can be 4 times more difficult. So you can kind of see how arthritis and pain can negatively influence how motivated you would want to be to, so if doing day-to-day tasks are difficult, the idea of doing more exercise actually doesn't appeal. And that's, completely appropriate, really, because actually, if you do more, it may feel more painful, but actually if you do more, it's just hard work, and actually you end up being more tired than you were before. We know, particularly sort of moving with pain when you've got hemophilia, for those that have got ankle and knee hemophilic arthropathy, most pain interference that they see is in their daily mobility and going to work. If you are a bit older, sort of with increased age comes an increase in that joint pain as well. And so this is likely sort of the progression and the long-term existence of hemophilic arthropathy, but possibly a little bit more around sort of how the neurological system copes and moderates pain as we get older as well. We know that pain interferes with work attendance, and so some people are unable to get to work, or some people choose not to work because of pain, or others go to work even when they've got pain. So actually this idea of presenteeism, where you don't feel well enough to be at work, but you feel that you have to go there, and you're sort of experiencing pain even whilst being at work. And we know that the more joint damage you have, usually the more pain in that you have, and it's associated with having a sort of less good mental health, with mood and anxiety problems as well. However, in recent years, it's really become unclear that the presence of joint disease does not explain all of the pain experience that people with hemophilia feel. And so we can't just blame all of pain that you experience on bleeding and or arthritis. And so this idea that pain is what we call a multifactorial experience. It happens, and it is experienced, and it is lived because of lots and lots of interacting reasons. And this sort of takes me on to this whole idea of, despite all of that sort of list of bad things that it might be there with having joint disease and hemophilia and pain, moving is important. We know that moving sort of maintains your sort of cardiovascular health. You will get older, and as you get older, you need to have a healthy heart and healthy lungs. As you move more and you are more weight bearing, you need to improve your skeletal system, so your bone density. And actually, as you get older, bone density is a problem. It becomes less. And actually, moving is good for your sort of self and your mind. And actually, one can't exist without the other. Your sort of sense of self does not exist external to your leg or your arm or your ability to get up and down the stairs. It's part of the entire the whole thing. And I think if we begin to think of sort of exercise and movement and physical activity as domains of everything rather than an exercise for your knee, we begin to see perhaps the benefits that we can take from being more active even when we have pain. So after all that, how do you get started? Where's the best place to start? Essentially, the current public health issue we have is not so much the lack of people being physically active, but it's the amount of time people are spending in a sedentary position. So being sedentary is essentially sitting or not moving for most of the day. So even if you did 1 hour of exercise, and really quite good exercise at lunchtime, if you've sat 4 hours before and you continue to sit 5 hours after that exercise, that sedentary time is probably on sort of more negative effect on than the positive hour you've done. And we know that, you know, if you're an older adult, so sort of over 65, really being less sedentary is the first place to start. And so being less sedentary is, I would often say to my patients, sort of doing little and often. So getting up, walking around the house, walking around the block, moving up and down the stairs if you have them. Excuse me. But essentially, doing anything more than sedentary is better. It will bring a health benefit, even if it's only 5 extra minutes a day. And so you're replacing that sedentary time with sort of activity that's any level of intensity. So that's from a very, very low intensity right up to sort of moderate or high intensity. So that's your starting point. Just be less sedentary. And for those that have sort of chronic ongoing pain or persistent pain, and those that are sort of living with widespread joint damage because of the bleeding disorder, one idea to think about is this idea of pacing. So if you're starting from a relatively low level and you're relatively sort of unfit, or you know that you are quite a sedentary person, the best sort of idea to think about is this concept of pacing. And this is best thought about as a sort of a structured approach to being active, and use the individual. You regulate what you do, when you do it, and for how long you do it. And the idea of pacing is that it's to help avoid this problem of flare-ups, so that you do too much, you have pain, you then don't move for 3 days, you then move some more, you have more pain, you then don't move for 4 days. So the idea is that it's a sort of a gradual process. You learn to sort of relearn what your own body can do and what it's comfortable with. And then you find a balance within that comfort. And the idea is it's to stop you doing too much, this idea of overpacing and underpacing. So doing little, being too sedentary. And it applies to all your activities. So as I say, work, social, leisure, about your house. This is a very brief sort of overview of pacing. It's a bit slightly more detailed than this, but actually this is a good starter. Know your baseline. So this is you planning ahead. So the best way to sort of do a self-assessment is thinking about an activity that you can do and you don't mind doing, and something that you want to get better at. So something like walking or standing, or it might be swimming, or it might be sort of the stairs. And then you time how long you can do that, and it stays comfortable. So when you have timed that, so if that's 10 minutes and it's comfortable, you then half that time. So 5 minutes is your baseline. And that is your starting time for activities when you begin to pace. And then when you feel in control with that 5 minutes of activity, you begin to increase that time gradually. And the aim with pacing activities is that as long as you're feeling comfortable and happy, you increase that time 10% every week from your baseline. And the idea is that you maintain that time in that baseline activity on good and bad days. So if you have a good day and you feel you can do more than 12 minutes, do not do more than 12 minutes. If 12 minutes is that week spent doing the activity, keep to that. And this helps avoid this idea of boom and bust. And this is quite a good way of beginning to sort of integrate more activity back into your sort of daily life and your daily routine. And really, this is because when we look at sort of things that moderate the sensation and the experience of pain, it is more than just exercise. It is more than just pain medication. It is more than just getting on with it. We know sort of lots of studies in pain. This diagram is really nice because you can see pain in the middle there. And then there are lots of lines coming from different things. So any line that comes from pain out or in with a plus on it shows that that is likely to make the sensation of pain worse, or moderate pain upwards. And that anything in there with a minus shows that that actually helps moderate pain down. So if you look at social support, there, you can kind of see that if you've got good social support, it actually can moderate your pain better. It can actually make you feel better living with your pain. But you can kind of see that if you've got reduced range of movement and sort of motor variability or sort of poor mobility, and the sensation of that can actually make your pain feel worse. If you're socially isolated, that can actually make you sort of have a worse pain experience. But if you've got positive expectations around what you may want to be doing with pain, actually that can begin to moderate that pain experience as well. And this is this idea that it's heart and wellness, mind, sort of, and learning new skills and learning sort of your bodily expectations yourself as well. And it's actually beginning to, you may have really, really good social support, but actually your previous experiences of moving around with your pain have led you to be quite anxious about moving more. So actually you may want to focus on what it is that makes you anxious and work sort of, or makes you fearful of movement, and seeing if you can actually moderate that. So it may not necessarily just be as simple as doing more or having more strength or anything like that. And how much do you need to do if you're coming from this lower level? Ultimately, you just need to do more. So whatever you did today, you need to try and do the same, if not more, tomorrow. And so there's this sort of little adage of some is good, more is better. For those that are very sedentary and do very, very little currently, if you do more exercise gradually tomorrow and the day after and the day after, the health benefits are greater for people who move from a sedentary position into being generally more active. And actually, as you become much more active and much more fitter, there's a general plateau in regards to the sort of the fitness benefits. And so somebody who is very inactive currently, they will have a greater health benefit if they did 4 weeks of increased activity than, say, an Olympic athlete who already runs 6 days a week. Their extra 4 weeks does not bring them any added health benefit. And so on that sort of left-hand side of the graph on the left, or in that sort of high risk to low risk, basically, the more active you are from a worse starting position, the more benefits you have to get, and you decrease your risks of other sort of health and well-being issues. So you have everything to gain and very little to lose of moving, even when you have pain. So I know one of my slides further back was saying that just moving around can be just harder work and more and worse to do, may be more painful. But actually, when you are beginning to move around, we want to think about this idea of being moderately physically active. And so moderate activity is something that you do where you are a little bit breathless most of the time, but you're still able to talk. And so for most people, you'll find that you will be able to walk, but if you walk faster, you become slightly more breathless, for example. But essentially, it should be enjoyable. It should be something you want to do, and it should be regular. So doing lots on Saturday and Sunday, and then doing very little during the week. And if you're doing nothing 7 days a week and you begin something 5 days a week, that's still better, but we would prefer, or it'd be better to have sort of daily activity. As you get older, weight-bearing activity is really, really important because you need to think about bone density and maintaining your bone health and wellness. Within the sort of weight-bearing activity, we know that even with ankle arthropathy and knee arthropathy, you're still able to do activity. You may just have to consider lower impact activity. So that may be short bursts of activity within a certain period of time, or even things like exercise in the water or a bicycle. So actually a bicycle is very, very low impact on your lower limb joints. So you get the moderate activity, but you don't get the impact on your joints. And it also brings with it a social factor. And that can be really, really important, that actually finding a sort of a like-minded group or finding your tribe is a really good way to sort of experience that. And I have this sort of slide here in regards to making new connections. And I think the making new connections can be both from a social perspective, so becoming more active and doing more even with pain. And on the left-hand side, this is a project that was done by the Haemophilia Centre in Belfast in Northern Ireland, and where they, the Haemophilia Centre, with their sort of older population of people with bleeding disorders and their families, teamed up with a local gardening sort of charity, and they actually sort of did a 6-week workshop where on an allotment, and sort of it was a social activity. There was lots of sort of walking to and from the place. So actually there was physical activity and socializing merged within a task orientated activity. So although they were moving and moving more, it was actually in relation to the sort of gardening program than it was about exercise specifically. And then there's this idea of making new connections in your sort of brain and your experience. And so this diagram on the left is what they call the mature organism model. And this was a theory sort of that was developed in the late 2000s by Louis Gifford, who was an academic physio working with people with chronic pain. And this idea that your brain isn't static. So even though you may have had lots of negative experiences with pain before, because your brain continues to scrutinize every new memory that is made, the more better a new memory to make in regards to being active or even within pain, can begin to make you think differently and more positively about your pain and movement. We know, and it's highly unlikely that anything you do exercise out will make your pain go away completely. But there's fairly good evidence to suggest that you can live better with the pain that you have whilst getting health benefits as well of exercise. And that's really this idea of you as a person exists and senses yourself within your own body, but your body and sense of self exists within a social environment. So that social environment is your house and your family, but it's also the sort of the built environment in regards to sort of, can you be active outside? Do you have a park to go to? Can you drive to get somewhere? So actually, it's been able to sort of rethink some of those options and how you can begin to make new connections. So, as I say, movement is different things to different people. There is no one size fits all. In the same way, your pain is your pain and my pain is my pain. Actually, within this sort of pyramid of things, there will be things that are more important to you, important to me first. And actually, moving more and sort of moving more with the things you want to do will be determined by what it is that's important to you. And so that's why people have to sort of adapt and individualize to what they're doing and accept that it actually will take some time. There is no quick fix to any of this, unfortunately, no magic pill and no sort of quick and easy way out. So I think from taking home messages, just plan and prioritize, be patient with your approach. And I think keep at it. And the main thing is really to sort of be kind to yourself and actually acknowledge that there may be setbacks, but actually those setbacks are part and parcel of the relearning sort of process and being able to sort of find a way forward that works for you. Thank you very much for your time. I'll stop sharing and we can take some questions.